Hi there, welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of a reading recap for you guys. I don't do these videos often, but I'd like to keep you guys in the know of like what I've been reading and how it's been influencing like my work and stuff. So this is my seasonal reading recap. This is going to be everything I read over the summer because as I'm recording this, it is Monday the 22nd, which means it's the first day of autumn. So autumn is officially here. Hello. I have my Halloween decorations set up. I know you can't see most of them, but there are Halloween decorations in this room. I promise. But yeah, since it's autumn now, I'm just going to go over everything I read in summer. Truthfully, I had a bit of a reading slump in various months over the summer, so I just didn't find myself having a lot of time to read. But I did read some great books and some not so great books this season. So I'm very excited to share those with you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start in June and work up into this present moment. So there's going to be bits of September in there too. I don't know if you guys count September as summer, but like technically half of September is still summertime. So I'm just going with that. Not all the books I mention are going to be in here simply because some of them are put up in a bookshelf way up high that I'm too short to reach, and I don't feel like getting a ladder out and getting them right now. But when I mention them, I will put the pictures of these books on screen for you guys. So, with all that being said, let's get into it. I finished the Compendium of Lost Tales, or Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, and this was book 3 in the Emily Wilde series. It's by Heather Fawcett. So, I'm a big fan of the series. I've been a big fan of the series. It's a romance fantasy type thing that focuses more on the fairies and like how their world triggers into ours. So this is the final installment. I don't know how to review this without giving away too many spoilers, but basically Emily Wilde is an academic who studies fairies, and she has a relationship with her co-worker Wendell, who is revealed to be a fairy king. Whoa, but he was like ousted from his kingdom. In the various books in the series, it's about her trying to learn more about the portals between the human world and the fairy world, working out the logic of how fey magic works, which is inherently flawed because most fey magic doesn't operate from a place of logic, or at least not human logic. And in some ways, one could argue that the fey magic kind of, in this book at least, has reminiscence of like eldritch beings almost. There's some characters in here that I would argue could operate on the same level as like eldritch beings. Basically, in this book, Emily and Wendell are engaged to be married, and that would make her queen of his realm. He found the door to his realm. He is trying to regain the throne. This is about Emily's lived experience in the Fey realm, period. There's like a threat of his like evil stepmother coming back to try to take the throne too. So this is very much more of a like political drama version of this. Like there's still romance, but this is a little bit different from the first two books. Some people complained and they didn't like this one. I still enjoyed it. It is different, but I like a little bit of political theater, so I'm not complaining there. But yeah, I mean, if you like this series, I think you'll still like this book. I love this series. I'm not a huge fan of romance or romantasy, but this is one I do enjoy. So if this sounds good to you, feel free to pick it up. I know I'm a horror author and I talk more about horror books, but if you wanted to dabble into romance, I would recommend starting it with that series, just in my opinion. Okay, the next thing I read, so this is starting in July now. So those two were in June. This is starting July. So I know I have not talked about these yet. So I finally read Animal Farm. This is a classic by George Orwell. And I really, really, really enjoyed this. I never got the chance to read this as a young person. The way this novel is written, it's meant to illustrate, like, harken back to like children's stories, or it's written in a way where, it's like animals on a farm. So, and the language used is very much like children book esque, but it's like being used to convey a more complicated topics. It talks about unjust governments, unstable governments, revolution, overthrowing that, and how quickly people within a revolution can turn into the very being that they claim to be against. This book is tragic. It's important. I think everybody should read this, especially in this day and age where there's so many elements of fascism on the rise, or totalitarianism on the rise. Truthfully, it's a scary time we're living in, but this, I think, would be a good way to introduce children to that idea, which I think is the point. I wish I would have read this when I was younger, but here we are. All the animals on the farm are personified and they represent a different type of person or, where we find ourselves in the midst of revolution, right? There's the farmer who represents the initial unjust government, right? Like he doesn't treat the animals very well, sends them to slaughter, and the animals are like, you know what, F this, and they revolt, right? So then they take over the farm and try to run things themselves. The pigs are deemed the smartest, and they quickly come up with some sort of system for the other animals to follow. One of my favorite characters, there's a couple horses. I'm trying to remember their names because again, it's been a minute since it's been a couple of months since I've read this. But there's one horse who's literally a workhorse, right? He will put his body under extreme stress and labor to assist the farm in whatever it needs. He is a helper and he was one of my favorite characters. There's another horse who abandons the project of creating their own farm, like self-governing farm, very quickly because she misses the pleasures of ribbons and sugar cubes that the humans would offer her. She abandons the farm and puts herself at another human-operated farm, which is also very interesting. There's some like old donkeys that are just kind of like, this happens, no matter what, nothing's going to change. There are chickens, there are dogs. So basically what happens is the pigs start to assert their dominance. There's conflict between the pigs, right? Where there's like Napoleon and then the other pig, and they have different visions on who should be leader, and there's competition between the two of them until Napoleon takes things by force, pretty much. His name's Napoleon, right? Let me double check. Yes, it is. Okay. So Napoleon kind of takes things by force or in like a really tricky way. At first, the humans try to take the farm back, but everyone fights against it, and like a lot of the animals are injured. And so Napoleon's rival, becomes kind of like a war hero because he put his life on the line to save the farm. And so people liked him. But then Napoleon didn't like that. So he started like a propaganda campaign, a smear campaign. He started weaponizing some of the animals, primarily the dogs. So he would take puppies and like have the puppies live with him and train them to be violent actors to keep all the other animals in line as like an intimidation force. He started aligning himself more and more with like human type qualities. So basically, like they initially had a rule that like they would not go to the farmer's house. Like none of the animals would stay in the farmer's house. Well, eventually, Napoleon taught himself how to talk. He started standing up straight like a human, and then he wanted to live as a human in the farmer's house, right? So the rules apply to thee, but not for me, right? So this is just kind of like, yeah, this is what happens when there's a power vacuum, and there's some actors that aren't like amazing who try to fill that power vacuum. And it's a really interesting read. I especially liked all the animals' perspectives to like what was happening, and how, I don't know, not necessarily how everyone turned on each other, but how everyone reacted to the growing red flags, and how even when you ignored the red flags in the beginning, because in the beginning they had like their own version of the 10 commandments written on the wall. Slowly people started changing those commandments because again, not all the animals could read, right? And that was a privilege that was for the few, and so everybody else was just kind of like following blindly, right? But when the rules were changing, nobody really questioned it because they couldn't remember what was written, right? I don't know. Again, like I said, this is a very timely read. I think this, if you haven't read this, you should. It's an interesting perspective on totalitarianism, and I think this is one of those things where we should like put aside party lines and just kind of pick this up and see like how quickly things can go south. So yes, very interesting read. Okay, the next book I finished was called Do Not Go in That House by Ruth Anna Evans. It's up there. It is too high for me, so I'm going to put a picture of it right here. This is an indie read if you're interested in checking out indie authors. Ruth and I did an event together last spring, and we sat by each other at the table, and so I picked up this book of hers because she said it was a not bisexual, oh my god, bipolar character featured in the main storyline, where basically this young woman buys a haunted house in a manic episode. She's trying to make it big online and become like a true crime influencer type person. So she buys the house of a haunted house from a tragic murder case, and she basically like exposes herself to this malevolent being just for clicks and views, which by the premise sounded very, very interesting to me. I think it was a good book. My only, like, if I had to point out a pointer, is like I felt the pacing was maybe not like it's a novella, right? And I have a hard time with novellas. like truthfully, and maybe this is a reoccurring issue for me, but I think the pacing was maybe not like completely up to snuff. And again, that could have just been a personal preference for me because I like things that are drawn out and more detailed. Like if it's going to be a short story, it's going to be a short story. If it's going to be a novel, it's going to be a novel. Novellas for me are just this weird in between where I can't fully decide how I feel about it. But it was definitely interesting because again, Ruth herself is bipolar. I'm bipolar. I've mentioned that on this channel, and so it was interesting for me to see somebody write a bipolar character specifically. And again, like everybody's symptoms are different. Her symptoms were maybe different than mine. This character's symptoms were probably different than mine. But it was an interesting read, and I like the premise. So if this sounds interesting to you, you should check it out. I know Ruth also has a lot of other horror books. Some of them I think skew a little bit more graphic. So if you can stomach that kind of stuff, great. I know they've released something called Push, which is about pregnancy horror, which is super interesting to me. I've never been pregnant and pregnancy scares me. So I'm sure this is something that would be truly, truly terrifying. So yeah, check them out. Okay, so this, I have another book by another indie author who I met last spring at Slay the Lake. And I mentioned their video, I think I mentioned their book in my last reading video. That was called The Opposite of a Suicide Note. This is Black Girl Silence and Other Things Made of Gold. This is by Mikey Kutiefly, and I prefer this book of poetry to the other book I read. I thought a lot of the poems in here were really, really good, exploring themes of sexuality, relationships, feelings about oneself, one's like lived experience, culture, family systems. Just really, really interesting. I remember preferring this to the first one. In the first one, like I read, was also good, but this one just felt like extra to me. This also has more to do with, like, again, like as the title would indicate, racial issues too. If you're looking for something like this, I highly recommend again another indie author, indie creator. Again, they work mostly with poetry. If you're looking for more indie authors, I think you should definitely check them out. So this next book on my list that I finished July with, I did not love. We will get into that. So I don't have it again because I put it all the way up there, out of reach, out of sight, out of mind. Again, I hate being mean about it, but this is how I feel. So I read Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, and I was disappointed and also confused because I think this book is really popular. I don't see what everybody else is seeing, and I actually find this book troubling in my opinion. I'm not one that speaks ill of other writers lightly. But this is just completely my opinion. So Don't Let the Forest In is marketed as YA. I just want to preference that. It is marketed as young adult, a young adult horror novel, which again, I've read young adult horror novels on here before and I've enjoyed them. I just read The Honeys. That was fantastic young adult horror. Blows this one out of the water completely. But anyway, so Don't Let the Forest In is a young adult horror novel in a dark academic setting. It's supposed to be like a mix of like dark fairy tales and like a queer romance, kind of like an eco folk horror type situation. I've been trying to read more eco and folk horror lately because that's something that I'm interested in exploring eventually one day. It's like the complete opposite of what I do now because I write a lot about technology, but I would love to dabble into that one day. So I bought this with that intention to try to read more in a genre that I want to be involved in. The problem is that I just think that this story was mishandled in more ways than one. So the queer romance, I'm just going to start off with the queer romance between the main character and their best friend who is bi, I think. And again, I'm going to say something controversial. Okay, here I go. So this was written by, I think they might be non-binary, but they're femme presenting or female presenting. I don't know if they use she, they pronouns or just they pronouns, but just the author is not a gay man or a queer man. And I feel like there's a lot of people who write queer male romances for the spectacle that it can be rather than presenting an authentic relationship. So that's one thing that sticks out in my brain. And if you're somebody who writes male MLM, yeah, because I know WLW, like if you write male loving male romances and you're not part of that category, it's not that you can't do it, but it's you need to take respectful measurements to it, and I feel like that's not really talked enough really, the same way like writing outside your race would be, or writing outside of your gender expression would be. I mean, to an extent, it's the same thing, but like, yeah. So anyway, that is already a take. Okay, so we live. So it's an elite private boarding school situation. The main character is an artist, is a writer. He writes these creepy fairy tale type things, very emo-esque type things, and he is really going through it. He has a lot going on in his life. One of them also being, trigger warning, an eating disorder, and I just don't think that was also done very well in my opinion. The eating disorder he has is often romanticized, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but like the book itself uses very flowery, poetic, lyrical language, and when you are describing an eating disorder like that without being sensitive, I think it could be easily read as romanticizing an eating disorder, because it fits with the emo aesthetic, right? Like being so thin and fragile and mentally unstable and blah 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 blah. Did not love that, especially since this is geared towards a young audience who might not be able to fully discern between something that is like serious and should not be engaged in versus something that could be like romanticized for an aesthetic. Yeah, so that's another thing. Okay, so we have that. The boy he's interested in, his little friend, is an artist who basically draws everything that this guy writes, and basically the drawings and the creatures that they're creating in tandem start coming to life and attacking their school and attacking their loved ones. So the parents of the boy who is the artist die. They are murdered, and is being pinned on this young man. They're in high school. It's being pinned on this young man, even though like the investigation again is just like a toss away point. It's not really like a huge plot point to the story. Likewise, like the teachers being, and maybe this is an age thing. This is a light comment. This is like an age thing because I'm too old for YA, but like all the teachers in this universe are either cruel or useless, and they don't really see what's going on, except these boys do. And okay, and there's one thing you could say where it's like a plot device being like, oh, are these monsters even real? But people are actively dying, so like that would indicate to me that like yes, they're real. But anyway, these monsters are coming from the woods, the forest, hence don't let the forest in, and they're coming and attacking the school, and these two boys are vigilant and trying to defend the school from monsters. At first it's just the young man who is the artist who is fighting these monsters, and when I mean fighting, I mean like literally fighting, and he is always cut up and bloody and bruised and all this other kind of thing. And again, that violence is also romanticized in a way, and like again, in the context of this being gay men, I find a little icky. I can't fully articulate why, but that feels icky to me. This romanticization of suffering and violence in a queer relationship between two young men rubs me the wrong way. But anyway, so there's there's that going on. This young short boy is getting beat up all the time by these monsters. Eventually they come together and start figuring things out. The main character stops eating, point blank period, and is like hallucinating, and you're trying to figure out like, okay, like, you know, what's happening. There is a plot twist that happens that you can maybe guess in the beginning. I'm not going to spoil it because that's like whole crux of the books, and if you actually want to read this book, then I'm not going to spoil that for you. But there's a plot twist that happens that reflects the mental state of the main character, and once that's revealed, things kind of make a little bit more sense. But then again, the ending is also encapsulating of the need to suffer. I understand dark romance, I understand taboo romance, I understand wanting to be poetic and sad, but all this put together was a lot for me. Again, I know the children yearn for emo culture. I know the children yearn for emo culture. I get that. And this, if this was pitched in the early 2000s, I would still do well, because I remember those types of books and the tragic porn that was coming out at the time. And yeah, that it still would have done well. I know dark fantasy, dark academic settings are also very popular. It didn't feel realistic to me because there weren't enough details about school really to facilitate like this is a school, and this is where it was lackluster. There, despite having poetic and lyrical language, there wasn't enough details about the monsters themselves, And the only way you got like a full picture of the monsters was because there's like pictures in the book, which I think can be great supplemental material. But if you're using that to replace actual descriptions of creatures in your writing, you kind of lose it for me. But that's again just a personal preference. That's like a personal opinion. So the horror, in my opinion, wasn't completely fleshed out to be a true horror. The romance, in my opinion, wasn't completely fleshed out in a way where it could be like a true romance, and it kind of fell flat on both ends. And then just how much troubling material there is for YA. I don't mind YA books that talk about serious issues. You know what I mean? I actually encourage that. But the way that this was written, I think showed carelessness as an author, especially when you're targeting a younger audience. That being said, I saw this author's Instagram because I was so curious about how this book was being marketed. And what pissed me the fuck off, I don't care if you disagree, because there's a lot of people that disagree and love this book and they think it's iconic and they love this book. And you have every right to think that. But what pissed me the fuck off is that the marketing of this book wasn't honest and genuine. And it was marketing itself in that dumbass Instagram way where it's like, hee hee, our silly little boys. I love shipping them together. Hee hee, our silly little guys. And I'm like, no, you're putting these young men through psychological fucking trauma and eating disorders and physical violence constantly. And this is being marketed as some cute fucking surface ass, Instagram ass, stupid romance clickbait type shit. And that for me is aggravating. It is so aggravating. And like there's women, grown ass women in the comments. Again, these are teenage boys, like thirsting, shipping, whatever, projecting feelings or whatever over teenage boys and queer teenage boys at that. So that is where you lose me. I am so sorry. I'm the stick in the mud. I'm in the very, like, there's a very small minority of people who did not enjoy this book, and I am one of them. I think it's irresponsible. Keep that shit out of horror, please. Like, horror can be violent. Horror can be devastating. Horror can be tragic. Horror can be sad. I've read books that all handle those things in a respectable, responsible way. This was not done in a respectable, responsible way. Also, let me talk about this. So the main character and his sister who go to the school, they're Australian, right? And there's like mentions of them being bullied for having an accent, being Australian. Okay, whatever. That surely would probably happen because teenagers are stupid, right? Tell me why there's very few characters of color in this book. And then the ones that are like a very vocal lesbian Asian American student, they never talk about the racism that she potentially receives, but it's all focused on the Australian shit. The author's also Australian. And yeah, looks like me. And that's never mentioned. Like being that character should have to deal with more bullshit. And I get it, we're in the perspective of the young man, so maybe he doesn't personally see that, or maybe he doesn't personally register that. But they have this whole expose that's like written in randomly about like queer rep and having like a pseudo heart stoppery thing of like, this is my label, this is my identity, this is what this means, blah blah blah. Like, so the latter half of the book they have this little insert in, and like honestly there's an opportunity for the main character to make friends with people who have like healthier mindsets or healthier relationships, and he just like chooses not to because he'd rather be alone and emo with this like tragic lover of his. And like I just what was the point? Or are you trying to be like, yeah, this is how I support this community, or this is why I'm part of this community? Like, this was like, okay, here's my educational moment for the YA people, but like, let's not educate them about eating disorders. So yeah, I know I'm like really ranting about this book and I'm being really sassy, and I don't like, I'll swear in my videos, but I know I haven't sworn as much as that. But like, this book really pissed me off, and that's how I feel. And I don't care if people, the fans of this book come after me. I think it's irresponsible. I'm not trying to censor anybody, but I'm just saying like, let's be the adults in the room, right? Let's be the adults in the room and think about what we're sending into the arms of, like, what we're putting out there for teenagers. Like, I'm not like a conservative. I'm not a prude. I'm not anything like that. I don't care. But I do care if I see something that could genuinely put someone in a mental spiral. And again, I was a young woman growing up in the early 2000s. Eating disorders were rampant. The media that was like online were scrutinizing people who had size 6 bodies, right? Calling them fatties. Like, I grew up in eating disorder culture hardcore. And that's something that I struggled with as early as like 8 years old, right? I do not want young people to live through that the same way I had to. And that's why that's why I just oh, I just can't. I cannot with this book. I really don't recommend you read it. If you want to see what the hype is about, go ahead. Because again, I'm in the minority. A lot of people enjoy this book. I just flat out do not. So that's my hot take. Don't Let the Forest In pisses me off. And I don't think I'll be reading anything else from this author. And again, I never like to bash authors as an author myself. I don't like doing that. I rarely do that. But this is an instance where I can't. Sorry. Okay, now that that's out of the way. Sorry. I'm going to talk about what I read in August. And again, I only read one book in August because I was struggle busting. But I read Lord of the Flies, another classic by William Golding. Okay, so I've never read this book. Again, this was something you probably read in like middle school. I got it on sale. Check that out. And I like the cover. So yeah, this is a classic. The language is stated. Sorry. But the idea of this book is there's a plane crash that happens. A bunch of little boys are on the plane and they're the only survivors. They crash down on an island, and these boys that they range from probably like maybe teenage years to really little ones, and they have to figure out how to survive on a desert island. Already a disaster scenario. But yeah, so the main character is this boy that's kind of like in between spaces. He's well liked amongst the other boys. He can make a noise with the conch, like a conch shell. He can blow into it, and not a lot of the other boys really know how to do that. So that puts him in a cool guy status, and he becomes like a default leader in the beginning. There are the older boys that want to focus on like hunting and stuff and aggressiveness. I don't know. There is my favorite character, girl. They treat him dirty the entire time, but he's this like little chubby kid with glasses. I think they call him Piggy, but like he's just trying to get like he's the intellectual of the group. Like, let's be for real. He's the only one that gives like actually concrete good suggestions of like what they should and shouldn't do. But the problem is he's painted kind of like wimpy as a coward, and he doesn't have the physical prowess of some of the other boys, so they don't listen to him and they actively bully him. Okay. And then there's like tiny little ones that are just a group of like little ones who are scared of things. They claim there's a monster roaming around, and then the older ones actually start to believe it because there's a lot of scary things and animals on an island. So you see the boys kind of break off into factions, and that's when shit starts getting dangerous. They start turning on each other as enemies, and a whole bunch of stuff ensues after the fact. The language is stated, so that might make it a difficult read for some people just because we don't speak like that anymore. We don't write like this anymore. But I still think this is, again, like I said about Animal Farm, I still think this is an important read about how we set up societies and what we value as a society, and like how quickly we are to turn on one another. This is going to be a reoccurring thing for this summer, I think, truthfully, because now that I'm like putting all my books together, I'm like, huh, reoccurring themes. Okay, yeah, eventually, like, spoiler, eventually they get rescued, but by that point there's already been so much damage done. The boys turn on each other, and some of them die as a result, and by the time they get rescued, the main character is just like so overwhelmed by everything that's happened that he kind of breaks down, and then the adults are not very sensitive about it. That pisses me off. But yeah, so the main character's whole thing is wanting to keep the fire going because in his mind he just wants to get rescued, and that's like priority number one. Whereas some of the older boys who like enjoy hunting are just like living out this like male power fantasy basically. And he doesn't get much support from people other than Piggy and like this one other kid who's also kind of like an outcast. And at first he like resists wanting to be an outcast with them, and like kind of goes with the older boys for a second, or like considers it. But at the end of the day, like he's just like he's outcasted anyway, because what happens when you're trying to overthrow an older regime, you get rid of the leaders from the older regime and then put yourself on top. So that's basically what the older boys wanted to do. But yeah, this is a good read. I think this picked up more so in the second half. The first half's a little long, not gonna lie, but I enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to read more like classics because again, like with the way things are going, there's been people who are very big on advocates about, you know, limiting access to certain books with messages like this. So that's why I've been trying to stock up on some of my classic literature that might be considered materials that might be dissenting, or like I mentioned with Oscar Wilde, I'm trying to build up my library of queer fiction because yeah, it's important to have that before that might not be the case anymore. So yes. Okay, so moving into September, these are my last two books that I read for summer. I read Another romance story. This is me dipping my toes into spicy romances. I normally don't read a lot of spicy books or spicy content. I am a bit of a prude personally for that, but I'm very pro letting your freak flag fly for everybody else. Go, friend. So this is me dipping my toes into spicy romance. I've been wanting to read this author for a very long time. Her name's Kimberly Lennings. I follow her on Threads, and all her book titles like are so funny. And so I wanted to give this a shot. I didn't want to dive into like one of her, because I think she has like a running series, and so I picked a book that was outside her most well-known series because I just wanted to start with something and not really commit to a whole series. But I think I will definitely pick up more books by this author because I think she's funny, and that's really what draws me in. Is she was very funny. The title of the book's way, way, way up there. Again, sorry, I'm trying to build up my secondary. I have shelves on my walls that kind of wrap around this room, and I'm trying to build my second one here. The first one's pretty much done, but the second one here, I'm trying to build up. So Kimberly Lemmings is up there, but that book is called I Got Abducted by Aliens, and Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com. And here's the cover. I'm going to put it on screen for you right now. But yeah, I got abducted by aliens and now I'm trapped in a rom-com. Trigger warning, potentially, like the romance is really fueled by like a love potion trope, or like they get like shot in the ass by darts that make them like mates or bond to one another. So you can argue that the consent is kind of like dubious, and if that's like a problem for you, I just wanted to give you this trigger. But the book does have this trigger warning and mentions it in the very beginning. So, and again, it's not, I don't feel icky when I read this, but again, that's just like personal preference. But okay, I got abducted by aliens and now I'm trapped in a rom-com. Basically what happens is Dorothy, the main character, is a like field biologist. She's studying meerkats in the wild. A lion attacks her, and then seconds before her death, she and the lion get abducted by aliens in a spaceship. And the aliens save her life along with the lions. And then she and the lion escape the ship in a pod and then crash on a planet. They ingest some sort of goo that allows them to communicate with one another. So now Dorothy has the lion and they talk to each other, right? Then she lands on the alien planet and there's giant dinosaurs everywhere. But they're not a one for one like with the dinosaurs from Earth. They're genetically changed to better suit the environment of this planet. So even like the fruits and trees and stuff are like ours, but not really. Come to find out that the aliens that abducted her are trying to create like a breeding program. Yeah, here's the dubious consent. But they are trying to create a breeding program between the species that they inadvertently murdered and human beings. So the species they inadvertently almost murdered are like these half goat men, kind of with horns, really big guys. They have the tails like you see in the Avatar movies, but some of those tails shoot fire. And yeah, they're all really big. So basically what happened is the aliens polluted their planet. Giant corporate overlord alien people polluted their planet on accident and killed off, like created a genocide, killed off most of their species. They try to save as many as they can, but unfortunately they only save the men because they didn't know about gender dimorphism in that species, and they only save the men. So it turns out human females are genetically compatible with these guys, so they put them on a planet together, and they get shot in the dart. The aliens shoot her in the ass to bond her to not one but two mates. So she got two boyfriends, and they're very different in personality, and I prefer one to the other personally, but I feel like everybody would. But yeah, but what I really appreciated about this book is that with the two men, she never has to like pick one. Like they fully are a throuple and care about each other a lot. Even the men who start off as like romantic rivals eventually like learn to like respect and care about each other, and they're fine with like sharing her as a mate. But then there's also like, because there's a lot of sex in this book, I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of sex. Some of the times where they engage in sex, like the men are pleasuring the men too. Not every instance, but there's like instances of that too. So it's like, okay, in my head, it's like, okay, we're not like a completely heteronormative couple here, which I appreciated, and that they are now like a functioning household. I like that. I like seeing a throuple. Like, I like seeing an accepted throuple. I love that. And the book, obviously, in its description, is goofy as fuck. And this lady's just funny, and the sex scenes, whoa. Again, like for me, I don't have a lot of experience in this world, but I will say I definitely enjoyed the spice in this book. I thought it was interesting. If you are young, please don't read this. You need adult permission to read this book. That's all I'll say. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. The story is silly but very funny. The aliens, they try to like recreate Earth and do things that like would make it easier for Earthlings to live, and some of the habitats they make are just like ridiculous and funny. It's interesting because her knowledge as a field biologist proves to be really helpful in the end as they're resolving their issues, because at first she like does not want to, she said fuck this, I don't want to be forced into this like relationship, you know, but then she like learns to respect each of them. So like the one boyfriend is she describes him as a Virgo man, and that tells me everything because not my speed normally, but I think he was technically a lawyer before all that shit went down on his planet, and she meets him first, and he is just kind of like sassy and bickers with her in that way. But canonically, the main character is the Cancer, and I'm a Cancer too, so that was fun. But yeah, earth signs and water signs are supposed to go together. I have a lot of friends, female friends who are Virgos. My mom's a Virgo, so I'm around Virgos a lot. I don't know if I could be with a Virgo man. That's me personally. I much preferred the other boyfriend, who is this very confident man. Um, Very confident man, bigger dude. He was like a fallen king, basically a fallen warrior king who wanted to give that up because he was tired of the violence. Very cocky, very like smug, but also a little bit more open-minded sexually with the other guy, and like probably bisexual. So I love me a bi king. And I don't know, I preferred him to the other guy personally, but that's okay. And then yeah, so basically I think this is going to be a continuing series because she teased something about like a new book that referenced something that happened in this one. So at the very end, like she meets another female that had to get mated with like the evil guy, the bad guy, the antagonist in this book, who was a rival king figure to the hot boyfriend, and he forced her to be his mate. But then she was not about it, girl. This girl had a gun, and she was like, fuck that guy. And some perhaps domestic and violence, I guess, ensued. Again, if that's triggering you, I'm sorry that that's in there. There was a little bit of partner violence because this person like did not want this guy to be her mate. The second she posted something online that was like, I think the new book title she was talking about was like, I shot an alien, now we're in couples therapy or something. Girl, it's crazy. So I'm gonna read more Kimberly Lenning's books. She has another series. Like one of her books was like, I yeeted a love potion at a werewolf. Just like stuff like that. It's supposed to be like romance comedy with a lot of sex, and I like the absurdity of it. I like her humor. I'm always looking for something a little bit weird and off the wall, and a lot of the weird fiction I read tends to be a little bit more sad or somber or horror related, but this is like weird fiction in the complete opposite direction that's just like silly and goofy and fun, and I appreciate that. So this is again another romance series that I did not think I did not expect to enjoy, but I did. So there's that. So my last book I read, I literally just finished this last night, and I'm going to probably go on and on and on about this because I have so many thoughts. This bad boy. Oh my God. I finished Tender as the Flesh. You guys, I did. Oh my God. I didn't think I would. Because let me tell you, this is gross. This is cruel. This is depraved. But I loved it. And not in the way that you think, because some people love the depravity for just depravity. No, the message behind this book is so important that, you know, we always talk about like, okay, well, what's going to be the next classic, right? For like our generation, what is going to be the classic that people like 50 years from now look back on and it's like, yeah, this is an important book for our culture and society. It's this. This is it. This has potential to become a classic book in the same way that I just said Animal Farm and Lord of the Flies is. Like, I fully believe that. But in saying that this is a tough read, I want to put as many disclaimers in the world as I can for you. This is a very, very, very tough read. I had to take breaks in between chapters because I felt physically sick at times. It's just a lot to digest and take. Again, if I was an English teacher in high school, I would be tempted to recommend this, but I don't think it's appropriate for young people to read. But God, is this important? And so yeah, let me get into this. Okay, this book is originally written in Spanish. I believe the author is from Argentina. This book is about cannibalism. yes and no. It's about cannibalism. So Tender is the Flesh takes place in a post-apocalyptic society where there was a virus that went through a bunch of animals and made them dangerous and sickly. And in order to prevent humans from getting this virus, basically what happened, everybody either killed off animals or let them go, or animals just aren't a part of the society anymore. So in order to still get protein from meat sources, they've kind of legalized cannibalism in this way that like that is inherently like classist and fucked up. Okay. So basically how this society is set up is that you have wealthy people that are like fine. They're the ones that are consuming what they call special meat, which is literally just like human flesh. We are at a point in the society where we're not really seeing it set up, but we're seeing it already established. And apparently, this took place in a quick amount of time because the transition happened when the main character's father was still young. So the main character works at a processing plant for humans, like a giant butchery processing plant for the special meat. And the special meat in this book, they're referred to as heads. I'm going to take pauses in between explaining this to you because a girl is crazy. The special meat, and they're called heads. They are male and female, and these are people that are bred to be consumed. So these people are bred in captivity, basically. They are chained up kind of like veal. So, like, they can't walk or run. They're chained up their whole lives, and their muscles become tender because of that. They remove their vocal cords so that when these people are butchered, they don't scream or bleed out or anything. They literally don't have a voice. Like the metaphors, they don't have a voice. They don't have a voice. There's differing degrees of like how special this meat is. And the really, really good meat gets tattooed, some initials tattooed on them every year to show that they're like really good meat. The entire time we're seeing this through the main character's eyes. He is a broken man who is having a rough patch in his marriage. He and his wife are effectively separated, but they're still married because their child died. Their child died unexpectedly overnight, and he's still grappling with that. His father is in a mental decline at an elderly home, and his father actually dies eventually in this book at the very end, but he's caring for his elderly father. His sister ain't doing shit. He's financing this all himself, and he's basically taking over. His father was like part of this butchering plant, and he's taken over, and now instead of cows, they kill people. And at first you're thinking like, oh, is this like an animal rights activist book? If you don't read this and you have that in your head, then it's easy to see how it would read this way, but it is not. This is a book about how easily we dehumanize other people and how we allow people to die and be tortured and subject themselves to cruelty under the system that benefits us. That is literally what this book is about. So in the book, we see it through this guy's perspective about all his clients that purchase meat, right? So he is interfacing, he goes and meets with other people. At first, it's like local butcheries that he has a history with, and, a woman he has a romantic history with who's also fucked up. Everyone in this book is fucked up. That's the point. There is no redeeming person in this book at all. At all. And so please don't think that the main character is some hero. He's freaking not. So like, okay, so basically he goes to the local butcher, okay, and he's like with this woman, and they have relations. Sometimes they have sex, and it turns out that like he kind of alludes to the fact that he was assaulted by this woman when he was young. He says before he was a man, right? Whatever that means, up for interpretation. But he continues to have a sexual relationship with her. She's fucked up. He's fucked up. That's a fucked up dynamic. Okay, I'm cussing again because I'm very passionate about this book. I'm so sorry. YouTube probably not monetize this, but here we go. So yeah, that is messed up. She gets meat. She does special offers, and she talks about how at first people were like feeling the need to explain themselves why they were buying meat, or they were saying they were buying meat for another person, blah blah blah. But then eventually it became normalized, so people didn't make excuses anymore. Great. We also see him interact with other customers, interview people to be part of the butchers in this universe. So when he's doing interviews for people, there's one guy that's really disturbed by everything that's going on, and the other guy that's like kind of excited about it, which implies that this guy is just like a murderous freak. And there's some people that come up in the story that are just murderous freaks. Even his own nephew and niece, they're painted in a way where they're completely desensitized because they never grew up in a world where people were not eating people. They grew up in a world that they didn't have pork, they didn't have chicken, they didn't have any of that. They just had people to eat. And so the way they talk about people is messed up, even as children. And the mom gets his sister slash their mom, she gets upset by it, like really upset by it. But in their head, they're like, "Girl, why are you freaking out?" Because they speculate like, "Ooh, I wonder what my uncle tastes like," and she's like, "That is so inappropriate. Like, what are you doing?" They're just like, whatever. So yeah, so the children are not all right. The people who really enjoy eating people are not all right. There, there is the people who want to kill people, they're not all right. Some people really enjoy the whole like butchering process. It's crazy. Okay, so and then there's what else is there? There's references to him visiting a zoo, an abandoned zoo, and like sitting in this place where he used to go with his father, and his father genuinely loved all the animals there, and he harkens back to that time because his mother died when he was young, and he had a hard time processing her grief. He literally didn't talk for a while himself, so in order to help him, like his dad took him to the zoo and tried to help him interact with animals as a way of healing. And even when I'm saying this out loud, this is so the metaphors. Anyway, so that's a thing. There's also people who hunt people for sport, like there's like rich people who order heads that are either like really buff guys, or they specifically look for pregnant women to hunt down because pregnant women offer more of a challenge because they tend to go feral, because they're trying to protect their baby. And it's just really messed up. And at this rich guy's house where he offers these hunting parties, sometimes there'll be celebrities that are actually hunted, like people who have extensive debts. And the guy who was running this said, like, yeah, if you have this debt and you last maybe like a week in the hunting zone, I'll clear your debts for you, right? And so at one point in time, the main character goes there and he's literally eating a celebrity who only had 5 hours left on his sentence, but he got shot. So that's messed up. Also in this universe, so you have like the quote unquote normal people, the privileged people who obviously aren't being hunted. There are the consumers of this meat. You have the heads, which are literally, like, I remind you, people, they are completely dehumanized in the language and how they're described, but they are people that are being bred for slaughter. And and not just that, because you would think it would be humane, right? But it's not in a lot of cases. There's some people who keep them in the house. Like, it's really fucked up at the end. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not gonna completely just grab everything, but there's some people who have domestic heads and keep them in the house only to eventually eat them all at once or gradually. And that's as far as I'll go with that. I don't want to. It's graphic. It's graphic, but it's important. Okay, so now let me get to the actual plot. That's the world building. So let me get to the plot. So this guy is going through it. He lost his baby. He's losing his wife. His dad is dying. His life is falling apart. He is going through grief. And grief is hard to express in this universe because you are constantly being surrounded by death and death of your peers. Because again, there's no animals, right? And he's surrounded by death every day at the butcher. He watches people kill other people. He's completely desensitized. Okay. Basically something happens, and this book is going to be completely spoilers, so if you don't want any more spoilers for this book, please click off right now. But basically he is gifted a female head. He's gifted this woman, and I don't know really why. They just give her, he gets the most expensive female head he can. She's beautiful, she can't talk, she basically spoils herself, and he sees her as an animal this whole time, right? The thing is, it's everyone tells him, okay, you can either kill her yourself and have meat, or you can, breed her with another head, or you can sell her to someplace else and get a good amount of money for it, right? He decides to do none of this. What does he decide to do? He assaults her and has relations with her. Again, this is a woman who cannot consent, who cannot vocalize, who's been chained up, who literally has not been able to run away because she hasn't been able to use her muscles before, right? Like, okay, all the context. So some people think that this is him having romantic feelings for her. He always talks about how nice she smells, and he's going through a lot of lustful things. Like, he has sex with the butcher woman I mentioned before. He's got complicated feelings about his wife because his wife's living with her mother, right? So a lot's going on. And I'm going to use the word assault because, again, she cannot consent. He assaults her, and then midway through the book, you find out she is 8 months pregnant. what he did is illegal in this universe, and he focuses on the fact that it's illegal rather than the morality of it, right? So he's trying to hide this secret that he's got this woman in his house. He moves her from the barn because he kept her in a barn, and moves her to the house, right? And taught her things like what a TV is. At first, she was scared of a TV. She didn't understand. Taught her what fire was. She didn't understand what a knife was, and she hurt herself. So he lets her out when she's at home, and she follows him around like a puppy almost, and like hugs him and shows him affection because, like, let's face it, she's never not known cruelty before, right? But at the same time, when he leaves the house, he keeps her chained up in this random ass room with food bowls, not even plates, food bowls, water bowls, and a bucket to go to the bathroom in, and mattresses on the floor. He has a TV mounted on the wall, and all she does is like watch TV and sleep and shit. Literally, that's it. And so he locks her up, and then when he comes back, he unlocks her, but then she sleeps during the whole day, so she gets restless at night. So he makes her lay in bed with her and ties her to the bed, so she just lays with him in bed. Okay, so he names her Jasmine because that's what she smells like. And as she's pregnant, he does everything he possibly can to make sure that like the baby's healthy and stuff. He buys a what's it called when you not a sonogram, ultrasound. He gets an ultrasound machine to check on the baby that he stole from the processing plant because they have relationships with breeders, I'm not sure. And he checks her out. He checks her blood pressure all the time. He's very vigilant because he lost his last child and he wants to take care of this baby, right? So he does all the things in between his little adventures. And his dad dies. He has to take care of the funeral and stuff. And even the funerals in this world are bizarre. And I won't get too much into that because that's not the point of the story. Oh my God. I'm just thinking things in tandem. Sorry. So basically, what happens is that he comes home after the father's funeral and stuff. And she's going to labor. And some weird green brown fluid is coming out of her, which would indicate that the baby's not doing so good. So he panics and calls his wife. His wife, mind you, is a nurse. That's been established. His wife's a nurse, so she comes over and has no idea what's going on. He says, okay, keep an open mind. And she's like, okay. Sees this woman on the ground. And she's like, what is this? And she's like, yeah, the child is mine. And she at first she's repulsed, but not by the fact that like he's having a child with another woman, because like you would think that, right? But she's repulsed by the fact that he had relations with a head, like with an animal. But then like once she realizes that that's his child, she like springs into action, tries to help deliver this baby. She does the damn thing, like coaxes the woman down and like gets the baby delivered, and it's healthy, it's a boy. And they cut the umbilical cord. I don't know if I mentioned his child was a son beforehand, but yeah, his child was a son beforehand. So they're cleaning the baby, they're all excited, he's holding the baby, his wife's holding the baby. Meanwhile, Jasmine is trying to reach out for her child, right? In the midst of thing all that. And they are annoyed with her for that. And then once everything's cleaned up, he sings to her to like make her calm again, which is the thing he's been doing this whole time. He like sings to her to make her calm again. And then he grabs her by the hair, takes her out back, and kills her. He like because what they do with the plants, they knock them on the head, make them unconscious and shit. And he does that to her. He knocks her on the head and he kills her. And the wife is mad. The wife says, why did you do that? She could have given us more children, right? And his response, the last line in this book, oh my freaking God. Wait, let me read it to you. It's like, oh my God, it's chilling. So he says to his wife, she had the human look of a domesticated animal. I literally, when I read that, my jaw dropped. I was flabbergasted. What? And I was off because it wasn't like a twist necessarily, but it just confirmed how vile this man is. And like, let's not forget, this is a privileged man. He is surrounded by rich people all the time. So much so that like, even so every now and then he has to get like a check-in, like an investigation from some sort of the government body that oversees this to make sure no illegal head things are going on. And normally you have to get an inspection to see like the head's okay, like you're not sexually abusing this animal. or you've killed it, or you've processed it. Like, they keep tracks of people, right? They keep tracks of not just like the people, but the animal people too. And because he knows somebody who's high up in that organization, he doesn't have to do the inspections. He can just sign off and then whatever. So that in itself is a privilege, right? He's around rich people. He's a very privileged man. So he does not give a fuck about Jasmine ever at this point. And he only used her to have a baby. And so now I assume that they're just going to raise the son as their own and maybe just lie about that woman getting pregnant, because she had pregnant. So in the beginning, it was established that they did a lot of IVF treatments because she had a hard time getting pregnant, the usual way. So this is why she would be on board with that, essentially having an animal surrogate mother. So they kill Jasmine. And it's so interesting because when he's at the zoo, there's these like wild dogs, right? And they're really dangerous. But there's some puppies, and he plays with the puppies despite getting contracted by the virus, because he keeps saying that the virus is like a government conspiracy hoax just for population control so they don't have poverty and crime anymore. Okay. But all that goes out the window because he's like playing with these puppies, and one of the puppies bites him, and whatever. But he misses playing with these dogs, and oftentimes he misses like having animals around him. He thinks about the lions that he used to go see. He thinks about his dad being loving birds and like talking about how beautiful birds are. And this whole time, like reading back, I was like, oh my God, Jasmine was his pet. Like, because he also talked about having 2 dogs that he really, really enjoyed. And he would do certain activities with dogs, like going up by a tree and like listening to music and stuff. And he buried them under that tree. He would take Jasmine to the same damn tree and play the same damn songs for Jasmine and like pet her. So when the quote says she had the human look of a domesticated animal, that's what it means. Because sometimes, like, let's be for real, when we have pets like dogs or cats or whatever, we humanize them. They become part of the family. They are an extension of our humanity, even though they're not. They are in this twilight zone border of like they're like us but they're not, right? And that's how he viewed her. He still at the end of the day viewed her as a disposable animal. And this poor woman was manipulated this whole time into thinking that she could trust this guy. And like at one point in time, because I even said that this guy's fucked up, even after the assault, right? He was observing her and she was like looking at the walls, and he made a comment about like it's almost like she's thinking. He really didn't think that this woman had the fucking cognitive capacity to have thoughts. Like, so he is very critical of the system, but he is like actively participating in it. And at first it seems like he's reluctantly participating in it, but the minute he can have something that he desperately wants to gain from it, oh, it's all hands off, baby. And even though he has this like empathy towards animals, he cannot extend that same empathy to this whole woman who he basically deems as an animal. And then there's this part in the zoo that has this like painting or stained glass thing of Icarus, right, with the wings. And there's so much metaphor in that about like flying too close to the sun and then falling. Like that's supposed to be an illustration for the main character, right? But at the end, it's like a half human, half bird like man. It's having the opportunity to fly to the sun and bask in this privilege and then like falling from grace. There's just so much metaphor and nuance in this book, and that's why I really, really, really think this is going to be a next classic. Like if I have grandchildren in the future, this is what they should be like. This is required reading in college or whatever the equivalent of that will be in the future, hopefully. It is absolutely fantastic, but again, such a hard read because the world building of this is so cruel and horrible. And the thing is though, like if you think about it, it's not far off to where we are now. Like there's literal genocides happening all over the world. Okay, sorry. So my phone just told me I'm low on storage. Basically, oh, my wired mic's not even on. Okay, I'm just going to talk directly to you. There's genocides happening in the world. There is people risking their lives in diamond mines or these rare earth mineral mines. There's people in sweatshops living in highly polluted areas. All this shit to uphold the system we're living in right now, aka capitalism and imperialism and all this shit. We are watching human beings die in the cruelest of ways to uphold what we would consider normal. And this book is just a perfect critique of that, and you should really, really read it. It's gross, but it's so good. It's literally only 200 pages. My copy is on sale and fucked up because I don't know what this is. This is, yeah. But please, 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 please pick this up. That's my last read for the summer. It is a hard read. It is difficult, but God, it was wonderful. So again, like I said, very high highs, very low lows in this month of reading. I hope that something I said resonates with you and you pick it up. If you are interested in this, I have lots of other videos about the books I've read, and I think YouTube kind of turned them into a podcast. I don't know what that means, but you can listen to a collection of videos about what I'm reading and what I'm thinking and how it relates to the world right now. So feel free to do that. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. That will help me out. I also have memberships. If you want to sign up and be a member and further support me on the channel, that'd be great. And until next time, thanks. Bye.